Hi, Jessica. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You know, I told you this before we started. This is a little like deja vu. I feel like I know you because I've been seeing you every month in that damn Writer's Digest. I opened it up and there's that smiling face greeting me. So it's weird when you do something like that. Hey, before we get started, you have a new book out that we're going to talk about and a lot going on. But before we do get started, give the audience a little background on you.
Sure. Yes, I have been editorial director of Writer's Digest since 2008. And I just last month stepped back from that role to assume an editor-at-large title so I could focus on my writing more. And I did that in part because I just signed a third novel contract with St. Martin's Press. So,
well, look at you.
Yeah. So my first novel, Almost Missed You, came out in hardcover back in the spring, and it will be new in paperback on February 6th.
Yep, and we will put links below.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And then I have a new novel, Not That I Could Tell, coming out in March. I can hold that one.
There you go.
And then I have a third that I'm writing right now under contract for 2019. So
well, you're a busy girl.
Well, yes.
A busy young lady. Let me put it that way. Well, let's kind of go back because I mentioned up front, and you just mentioned that you were with Writer's Digest, and you started that job in 2009?
It was 2008.
Oh, 2008. So you've done that for quite a while. Let's kind of go back and talk about that because you're very young. And again, I mean that from anytime an old man says you're very young, you just take it and go, okay, yeah. But you really did. You moved into that position at a relatively young age.
I was.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that.
So my first job out of college was actually with Writer's Digest books. I was an intern. So I was a journalism student at Ohio University at the Scripps School of Journalism. And I got an opportunity to intern with Writer's Digest books, but I knew nothing about book publishing at the time, so it was an amazing opportunity. But my concentration was magazine journalism. And before I graduated, the magazine came to me and said that they had an opening and they wanted me to apply. So my very first job out of college, I don't really want to say the year.
All right.
Longer ago than you think. My first job out of college was with Writer's Digest. So I kind of cut my teeth there, started my career there, and worked my way up for a few years. And then I left and I worked in a number of other areas of publishing. So I spent a year working in marketing and public relations. I eventually transitioned over to nonfiction book editing. I worked for a variety of kind of niche commercial nonfiction book imprints and was a managing editor and a senior editor of two imprints when the editor-in-chief job at Writer's Digest opened up. And, it was where I had started my career, and I just love writers. And I love reading about writing, and I love writing. And I think the fact that I had done so many things that our readers aspire to do made me sort of uniquely suited to come into that job and sort of know what it was like to be behind the book editor's desk, know a little bit firsthand about marketing and public relations, and to have worked in so many different areas of the business. And so I was editor-in-chief of the magazine for about 10 years and then became editorial director. And I do still have a hand in now as editor-at-large, consulting, contributing content to the print and the web. I'll still be representing them at conferences and things like that. I'm just not at the full-time editor's desk anymore.
Well, they are smart to keep you as the face. But as you say, when people don't really recognize you when you go to these things. But well, let's talk a little bit about the writing, because you've got the college background, you've got the cred as a publisher. Had you always been a writer?
Yes, but I really did wholly turn my focus to journalism when I was a student and very early in my career. I've always read fiction more than I read anything else. But as a writer, I was really more focused on essays and interviews. And through my time at Writer's Digest, I wrote the cover interviews for probably most of the issues, the interviews with bestselling authors. And I've had an essay in the New York Times. I've had an essay in Publishers Weekly. But fiction writing was something that I always sort of wanted to do, but never, I don't know, it just wasn't something that I seriously pursued until I came back to Writer's Digest the second time. And I just think it would be very hard to love books and love writers as much as I do, and have that job and not want to give it a try yourself. I mean, first of all, you interview a lot of writers, so I think once you start talking to these people, especially, we're talking about just some of the most successful authors you could possibly think of. I've interviewed Stephen King, David Sedaris, Alice Walker, and you talk to these people and all of a sudden they just kind of seem like regular people. And I think it makes it seem doable. It's not something that somebody on some mysterious cloud is doing. It's just regular people talking to you about the same things that I struggle with and that our readers struggle with early on. And then also just editing, the articles in Writer's Digest with tips on writing fiction.
Yeah.
I think you'll read an article from a top class contributor like David Corbett on characters, or James Scott Bell on suspense, and think, gosh, that's such a great idea, I should try that. So kind of an irresistible pull. So it was not long after I came back that I started kind of seriously, I say seriously, but nobody really knew I was doing it. So I started a writing discipline, a pretty disciplined writing discipline at home, but I was kind of doing it in the closet.
I like that. That's a really important point, I think, because there was a moment in time when something clicked or a switch went off and you kind of shifted from the journalistic side to actually the authoring side. But one thing I want to follow up with is you make a really good point when you talk to all of these authors like a Stephen King, and I haven't talked to King, but David Baldacci, Nelson DeMille, you and we can name drop. We have a name drop party, it'd be great. But what's really funny is they are regular people with what I call an irregular skill. But when you listen to them and you listen to their process and how they do it, the one thing that I think sets them apart is the talent, of course, but also the dedication. Yes. And the point where David Baldacci, I think, said, the difference between me and the guy that hasn't written 10 million words is I've written 10 million words. And I think, I think that's probably something that you found as well when you're talking to these writers. But at the moment when that switch was made, tell me, there's a moment where you went, hey, I can do that. I can move from the journalist. I can take off this hat and put on the next one. How did you come up with the idea for the book? And was that the idea for this book?
Well, no, it was not. And first of all, before we move on to that, I do want to say, I think writing is one of the few careers that it seems like people don't even aspire to retire from it. It's such a passion. And I mean, David Baldacci is the perfect example. He's kind of obsessed with writing. I mean, he could stop. He could never write another word. And I'm sure he could retire quite happily. Yeah. And not only is he still writing, but he's writing like more than he's ever written before. I mean, there have been years where he's released 3 books, and so many of these writers, if you talk to them later in their careers and you ask them, are you thinking about stopping? Or are you thinking about slowing down? They act like you're nuts for even the best job in the world. Why would I do that? So I think it does kind of have to be a passion in order to pursue it. So no, for me, Almost Miss You was not my first novel-length project that came together. I had an earlier novel that it did eventually secure me an agent, but it never sold. And I wrote and rewrote and revised that novel for 5 or 6 years. So I actually signed with that agent on a revise and resubmit request, which is when when an agent sees potential in your work. And this one was generous enough to give me a critique, a very detailed phone critique, where he told me everything that was wrong with my manuscript, which was a lot. But I agreed with his feedback, and I literally opened a new blank document, and rewrote the entire novel. And he did sign me based on that rewrite, but he was never able to place that book. So Almost Missed You was the story that I wrote while I was collecting, he called them rave rejections for that first novel for about 18 months.
Yeah, I have enough of those rejection letters to paper a bathroom. And I'm talking about a master bath, not a small bath. That rewrite and resubmit, man, I know a lot of authors, when they get that, they're like, I have to write, I have to change. Talk a little bit about that, because you don't just, unless you're incredibly lucky, you don't just submit a manuscript and it goes through Golden and you become rich overnight. It's a lot of work. And a lot of times, even if you get an agent, you end up not selling the book, which is a whole nother disappointment in itself.
Yeah, your family kind of starts to avoid asking you about it at the
How's the book?
If there's something to say, she'll say.
Yeah.
I think, well, first of all, if you're just submitting, obviously you don't have to take the feedback that you get. So there are kind of different, spectrums of getting that kind of feedback. So in this case, it resonated. I felt like he understood what I was trying to do with that story, and he understood where the story fell short. But I know of people who've gotten revise and resubmit requests and didn't agree with the feedback, and so it wouldn't make sense for you to take it because you're already not on the same page as that agent. But yes, I think even after your novel sells, you are always going to get revision feedback. So it's something that you have to get used to, kind of getting that. It's called an editorial letter is the first step when you're under contract. So we liked your novel well enough to buy it, but
yeah,
everybody wants to make it as good as they possibly can, and that should be your shared goal as well. I would much rather have my editor catch a plot hole than have reviewers on Amazon
so
they will catch it. So.
Oh yeah, and they're not nice about it either.
Not always. No.
Yeah, amazing. So did you ever publish that book, or is it just shelved somewhere?
No, it's done. Actually, I ended up parting ways with that agent. And so at the time that I did, I had two books. I had this one that had garnered some rejection. And then I had this new one that nobody had seen yet. And I wasn't really sure which to submit or what to do, but I ended up finding an agent who took a look at both of them. And she said that she thought that the second novel, which was Almost Missed You, showed so much growth in my writing that she didn't think that we should try to submit the first novel. And then if I signed with her, I knew that in signing with her, I had to sort of let go of the idea of the first novel, which honestly, at that point, I think I was kind of ready to let it go.
Yeah, there comes a point where you have to let that baby go, but it can be very, very hard. Well, let's talk about
people. I feel like I let it go more willingly than other people do. That's probably the number one thing I get asked about at book clubs that I visit now to talk about Almost Missed You is they'll say, well, you could publish that now, right? You could self-publish it. You could pull it out. And, I'm okay with it.
Well, I think the key is to get so famous you can publish anything and get away with it. That's my goal in life, is to be so famous I stop caring what I publish, just as long as the checks keep coming. Well, let's talk about the new book. And again, I'll put a link below, Almost Missed You. Tell me about the book.
So Almost Missed You begins with a young family that's on their first family vacation, and they have a young son, and the wife and the mom is kind of sitting on the beach having her happy moment, drinking her pina colada, reading her book. Her husband has taken their 3-year-old up to the hotel room for his nap, and she's kind of just having one of those life is good moments. And she goes up to the hotel room to relieve her husband and wake her son up from his nap, and they're gone. All their stuff is packed up, and her husband has left her in the middle of their family vacation and taken her son along. So she's completely blindsided. Everyone who knows them is completely blindsided. And so the story kind of backs up from there to ask, what was going on in this couple, and was their story the story? Everybody thought that they were just this fated, meant to be couple. And so was the story really what everybody thought, or was there more to it?
I think the big question is, did you think of this idea when you were sitting on the beach in Destin and
No.
your husband was up in the room?
He gets that a lot. He gets a lot of questions about this one.
Yeah. How did you come up with the idea? Because it really is, I talk about this a lot. Whenever I look at a book, I always try to start with a question. What if this? Mm-hmm. And in this case, what if you are sitting on the beach and you go back up to the hotel room and your husband and child are gone? How did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, I didn't actually start with that opening scene. It was more with bigger thematic, more of a thematic premise of the book, which is I'm really fascinated with the idea of how people meet and the idea of this concept of what's meant to be and what might have been and the one that got away and all the kind of terms that are tied up with those things. And more than I'm fascinated by them, I'm also just fascinated by the idea that everybody is so fascinated by them. Go to a golden anniversary party and people will be asking the couple, how did you guys meet anyway? And that could be the most insignificant part of their 50 plus years together.
Right.
But for some reason, we attach some kind of significance to that. I mean, How I Met Your Mother was a TV show for 7 seasons, so I wanted to I had the idea to kind of create a couple who everybody thinks has one of those stories and then kind of twist it so that, I guess it makes it sound like I'm cynical, which I'm really not, but I guess I took kind of a cynical approach to the story. Well, what if meant to be is relative and sort of in the eye of the beholder? And what if that story they've been going around telling everybody isn't 100% true? Mm-hmm. Maybe even the people in the relationship don't know that it's not 100% true and there was more to it. So I kind of started playing with that idea and eventually backed up to everything kind of coming out in the open with the big catalyst of him sort of kidnapping their son.
Yeah. Do you believe in the concept of a soulmate? That's a very deep question on an author show, isn't it? Wow.
It's in the reader's group guide, the book. So I think I believe in the concept of a soulmate, but not necessarily in just having one.
Yeah, there could be more.
Something that plays into the book too. Yeah. If you have more than one, then what determines the one that you end up with. Yeah,
what's the old Stephen Stills song? If you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. Who knew? Like he was so deep. The book
is. If you can't love the one you're with, you leave her at the beach, and
you leave her at the beach, and you get in the car and you go find that other one. So, would you categorize this as a romance or a mystery or a suspense?
My publisher categorizes it as upmarket women's fiction with elements of suspense.
Ooh. So, wow, that's good. I haven't heard that one.
Shelf is, right?
Huh?
You know where that shelf is, right?
You hope it's at the front, but probably not.
It's kind of a blend of family drama and suspense. It's a suspenseful family drama, I think.
Yeah. And how long did it take you to write the book?
Actually, fairly quickly. I'd say I wrote it in under a year, about 10 months.
Yeah. Do you find that writing fiction is easy for you now? I mean, it's never easy, but it's, you know what I'm saying? Do you sit down and do you slave over a book, or does it just kind of flow?
It varies by day. I think there are days where you slave and there are days where it flows. And the important thing is just to be there every day.
Just in case.
How easily it's coming.
Yeah.
But I think I'm not an outliner. And so for me, I write with a certain amount of fear that I'm on the right track, maybe. And I think once you start writing to deadline, there's a pressure that you add where what used to be kind of just a completely fun, creative exercise, like, well, I'll see if this story goes anywhere, now kind of becomes, gosh, I better figure out how to make this go somewhere. So
yeah. When it becomes when you start writing, it's kind of a fun hobby, and then if it turns into a job, it's not so much fun anymore. But that pressure is there.
But I think it changes, and definitely the word easy does not come to mind.
Yeah, let me backtrack, and I'll edit out that word and come up with something more.
Okay.
What is your process? Because I know you're married, you've got children. Do you write on a schedule? Do you sit down and try to knock out so many words a day? What's your process?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the process of figuring out my new process, since I just sort of changed my schedule just last month, so it's still very new. But I think it used to be, up until very recently, my process was that I worked really late at night after my kids were in bed.
Right.
So it started as after bedtime, maybe I would pop into my office for an hour, and then I'd, join my husband on the couch and watch Better Call Saul at 10. And then, right. And then after I was under contract, then it pretty much became, I'm in my office and I'm the last one up every night, and my office door is closed every night, basically in here until I'm literally falling asleep in my chair some nights, as long as possible. But I really was trying not, already being a working mom with a full-time job, really trying not to take any additional time away from my kids, which wasn't always possible when I had a tight revision deadline or a copy edit deadline. Sometimes I would have to work on weekends, but I was really trying to, I would exhaust myself during the week, but then spend most of the weekend with my family. And that actually kind of worked for me for a while, right up until I think I just kind of started reaching the tipping point. So now I have, more of a split, which is great, but it is a little bit of an adjustment. So now I'm trying to write in the morning, which isn't how I was working before. But then, in the middle of the day, to switch gears and do some freelance editing work or work on a blog post or something like that. And then sometimes come back to it in the evening if I feel like I have to. So hopefully we'll be achieving a little bit more balance. But I think, one should not underestimate the amount of work that goes into promoting a book. So when you have one that's still out and you're still going to, I'm still going to book club meetings and festivals and things like that for Almost Missed You. And then you have another one that's coming out and you're starting to get early requests for Q&As and things like that. That does cut into your writing time pretty significantly. So there's a lot more to it than just, but I try to adhere to at least 1,000 words a day, a minimum 1,000 words a day.
Okay. Jessica, you mentioned that when you write, you don't do a lot of outlining. Do you write by the seat of your pants? I guess you're a pantser. Do you still write with the end in mind? Do you know where the story is going?
Yeah, it really varies. I try not to be like a pantser who wishes I wasn't. I think what I actually do is kind of a hybrid between the two. Like, I'll have points where I stop and I'll kind of try to map out as far as I know. I just did that last week. And that can take a lot of time and brain power. And then it gets a little frustrating if you're not hitting your daily word count. But I think after you do that, then you'll have, some 2,000 word a day days to make up for it. But so last week I tried to stop and map it out, and I was only able to get about 2/3 of the way. But so I'm, almost there, but I think my brain just works in a more organic way. I mean, the scene I wrote this morning, I didn't even have an idea for until last night. And then it seemed like it was the perfect way I needed to wrap up this chapter. So I enjoy that part of the process. But then, like I said, there's also the lack of, I don't know, there's that uncertainty about where it's going. Well, Lisa Scottolini writes that way. She releases 3 books a year, 2 thrillers and 1 book of essays. And I really liked what she said about it when I interviewed her, because she kind of was just saying that you have to get used to, you have to put your characters in this dilemma, and you can't just fold up the tent.
Yeah.
You can't just fold up the tent and go home. So you have to figure it out. You just have to figure something out.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like you can end the book with them drifting at sea.
Exactly. But with my second novel, Not That I Could Tell, that's coming out in March, I did know there's sort of a twist at the end, and I knew that twist from the beginning. And so for that whole book, I didn't know everything that would come between, but I was sort of writing toward this twist. So I was writing toward the ending with the second novel. With the first novel, I did not. Where I am now, I have an idea of where I'm going. So I think it varies by book, but also I'm young enough in my career to say, I don't really know yet how it's
Yeah.
worked best for me.
Well, a lot of times I have found that if you try to adhere to strictly to an outline, it can dampen the book. I'm one of those old writers who believe that the characters write the story.
Exactly.
And so if I try to force a character to do something into a situation that they don't want to do, it negatively affects the story. Are you the same way?
Yeah, I think if you write a very logical outline, you end up with a very logical story that maybe doesn't have the right fire to it. So it's kind of, I think the right mix is somewhere in the middle, which is what I'm trying to find, where you have a little bit of a plan, but then also the freedom to kind of and I feel like it sounds so, I don't know, kind of woo-woo to say that, like to let the characters surprise you. But they do. Do surprise you. So,
well, I know you had mentioned that, you had this idea for this scene, the other night. Right. I literally have had characters, and this sounds really weird, and no, I don't drink excessively. I've had characters come to me in dreams and go, I'm going to go do this. And then wake up and rewrite a scene, and it flows a lot better. And I think a lot of writers have a hard time doing that because they have to try to keep it in their voice. But unlike you and me, they haven't interviewed all these people who tell us otherwise, right?
I think I don't know if I've had a character come to me in a dream. I kind of wish they would, but I sort of do that thing that Stephen King talks about, letting the boys in the basement work while you sleep, where I'll sort of try to make sure. And I think that was actually the good thing about my old routine. I don't miss that level of exhaustion, but it was good to go directly from my office up to bed because it was freshest. I would read somebody else's work a little bit before bed, but it was still the freshest in my mind. So now that I'm not necessarily doing that, I do try to make sure if I have a problem, if there's something that I don't know what's going to happen next, I try to make sure that is on my mind when I fall asleep.
Yep.
Kind of like assign it to your brain. Work on this one. With something by tomorrow morning.
Exactly. Well, the only problem with Stephen King's boys in the basement is they had rats eating at them. So there is that.
Yeah, so, mine aren't that creepy.
Yeah, you have like cute little mice. Yeah. Jessica, write this.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the business side of things, because you, better than a lot of authors, I think, are really cognizant of the fact that writing is a business. It's not just the writing. That's a very small piece of it. Talk about how you have approached things, because you're not only writing now, you're marketing, you're going to book clubs, you're already working on the next thing. Are you approaching the writing as a business now?
Yes. I mean, for me, this is basically, really, it was a full-time job before I called it a full-time job. It was 2 full-time jobs is what it had turned into. And I think it is a business. It's nice if you can kind of separate the creative side. And I know there are authors who, I think once you get to a certain point in your career, you can draw what boundaries you need to draw around that. So I know from interview requests, and you probably do too, that certain authors, when they're on a deadline, they won't do anything like this. I'm not going to stop and talk about my last book. I am completely focused on my next book. I don't think people who are newer in their careers really have the luxury of being able to compartmentalize like that. You kind of have to do a little bit of everything. But I think you can earn the right to draw some boundaries at some point, and it's really nice if you can do that. But I think otherwise you just have to do it to yourself. Like, so I try not to book anything business oriented in the morning. So I'm trying to allot the morning as creative time, and then once I've had lunch and whatever, then in the afternoon I can work on, some business side type of things. But it is a business. And I think anyone who thinks it's not will find out very quickly.
Yeah, they're in for a rude awakening. Do you find now that you have time management skills that you didn't call on before?
Well, as an editor, I think I've always had really strong time management skills. So I think works in my favor now. It translates very well. Especially, I think when I've been in a lot of different kinds of editors I've worked with, when you work with, when you're a book editor, when you work with authors, that is a long-term relationship. You know, you're going to be working together for a year or 2 years, and you kind of go about relationship building in a different way, I think, than when you're a magazine editor and you're working with someone on a more assignment by assignment basis. And then sometimes they'll turn into a regular contributor and it becomes a more long-term thing. But I've had a wide array of experiences working with writers as an editor where I know where things can go awry. And so I try in my writing life to conduct myself in a way that I hope won't ruffle any feathers with my they're very, very hardworking, overworked, very underpaid people for the most part.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk a little bit about the industry now, because it seems to change so often. You know, with the self-publishing is so easy to do now, but you've still got traditional publishing still going strong. Your thoughts on that? Now, you were traditionally published, right?
Yes.
Yep. And did you think about doing the self-publishing, or was this just the route you wanted to go?
I did not think about self-publishing, but not because of any reason other than I know how much work it is. I mean, we talked about this being a business, and even publishing traditionally with a lot of people handling a lot of the steps for me, it still very quickly became a full-time job.
Right.
And I think if you want to self-publish your work and you're going to be savvy about it, you are an entrepreneur, you are a small business owner at that point of your own kind of company. And so for me, that wasn't anything that I felt ambitious enough to take on with a family and a full-time job at that point in my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think understanding the business side of things is almost more important if you self-publish. But it is amazing how many options there are today with self-publishing, digital only imprints, you know, small press imprints, and kind of everything in between. And I'm published with St. Martin's Press, which is an imprint of Macmillan, which is one of the big five in New York City. And all of the editorial experience that I had was with smaller publishers and regional publishers and niche publishers. So even from the editor's desk, I was able to see kind of the differences.
So Jessica, tell me about the new book. What are you working on now?
So Not That I Could Tell is the book coming out in March. I'm done working on it. But it is about a close-knit community in a little town in Ohio called Yellow Springs. It's where Dave Chappelle lives now.
Oh, really?
Claim to fame. It's just this little eclectic town, and there's this close-knit kind of community where the women realize behind someone's husband builds a fire pit behind her house, and all her neighboring women realize that their baby monitors can reach to it one night. So they have kind of a girls' night in their backyard, and they all drink way too much. And by Monday morning, one of them is gone, and they were the last people to see her, but nobody really remembers very well how the evening ended or what was said.
Another who done it, or where did they go? What do you call it?
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Well, we've got just a couple of minutes left, and I know you probably get tired of being asked this question, but your advice to authors who are maybe starting out now, or even those that have been doing it a while and struggling to get things going, what's your advice to these folks?
It sounds like the most common advice in the world, but really the most advice is just to stay with it. Perseverance. I mean, there's so many people who give up, and there will be times when it's more tempting to give up and seems more pleasant than pushing ahead. But there are so many talented people and so many hardworking people trying to pursue writing, and I think that you just need to have a combination of both, and something will hit for you eventually.
Do you think talent always rises above marketing, or does it take great marketing to show the talent, or sometimes the lack of talent?
That's an impossible question. No, I think
I've never asked an impossible question.
I mean, I feel like what the answer should be that talent always rises above, but yeah. I'm not sure that is the answer. I think there are plenty of great books. Do you ever discover a great book that you just can't believe that no one you know has read it, that it wasn't on the bestseller list? There are so many books out there that are wonderful books that don't get the attention for whatever reason. And there are books that get a lot of attention that maybe don't reflect the most talent in the world, but there's something about them that resonates. So I think it's an impossible question, but I don't think that anything is insurmountable. So Chris Cleave is my favorite example of that. He wrote a book called, he's probably most famous for his book, Little Bee. But he's a British author, and he's written several books since then. But his debut novel was this book called Incendiary, and it was about a terrorist attack. It was a novel, a fictionalized story about a terrorist attack in the Tube in London. And the day the novel came out, there was a terrorist attack in the Tube in London.
Oh, wow.
They pulled the book off sale. It was on display for, I think, a couple of hours in a few bookstores, and came down out of the window. They took the signs down. It suddenly seemed very insensitive to market this book, and it was a complete catastrophe. But there were a few copies out there where what you were saying about talent rising above, there were a few copies out there, and people really loved them, and this grassroots support for the novel kind of started, and there was this word of mouth about it, and eventually it did get reissued. Eventually it became a movie starring Jude Law. And
that would be my luck right there. That was me and Chris Cleave. Man, we have the worst luck in the world. So, hey, I'm glad that did not happen to you. The book is Almost Missed You, and we will put links below. And the new book is called again?
Not That I Could Tell.
Not That I Could. See, I thought you were telling me you couldn't tell me the title when I first asked. So you might, yeah. But, and is that going to be available for pre-order? We can put links to that as well.
Yes, it's up for pre-order now, and it will be out in March. And Almost Missed You will be new in paperback in February.
Fantastic. Well. Jessica Strawser, if folks want to know more about you and your work, where do they go?
Yes, they can visit jessicastrawser.com, connect on Facebook at Jessica Strawser Author, or on Twitter at Jessica Strawser.
And we will put links to all of that stuff below. Hey, this has been fun. Let's do it again next time you write a book, which is going to be soon, right?
I'm working on one now, so.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, we appreciate it. It's glad to meet you finally. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, you too. All right, thanks.
Bye-bye.